Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I'm going to go through a presentation. Parts of this are similar to something you've already seen, but I think it's probably important to go back and just establish the baseline for the redistricting process in Chesterfield County. And then there are developments more recent, and we'll talk about those as well. And it will take us up to where we are. As the board knows, there was a public hearing that was held and closed at the last board meeting, October the 27th, and the board decided to defer the decision to this meeting. This is where I'm challenged, but let's see. The requirements for redistricting. These are the rules that we are bound by. The law requires the board to change the boundaries of its magisterial districts every 10 years, and that has to be done in the year ending with 1 after the census data is provided, and that is this year. So we are in the year where the redistricting decision has to be made. District changes are needed to apportion or reapportion population among the districts, and those boundary changes have to be made based on the U.S. Census data that we just received. So there is no other source of data or information or numbers or anything else, but it's U.S. Census is what we have to rely on to make our boundary changes. And just 2 other points. One is we don't make changes based on political party affiliation or voting history. This is not a political exercise in that regard. It is a data numerically driven exercise. And the redistricting of magisterial districts does not change or affect any school district boundary. Those are completely different processes altogether. So there are certain requirements, and actually that are, these derive from the Constitution of Virginia. So it's that magisterial districts have to be both contiguous, meaning that all portions of the district touch each other, and 2, they must be compact. Okay, and contiguous is pretty easy to understand. Compactness is not quite as clear. Compactness, actually our current districts are in the scheme of establishing districts would be considered quite compact. But these are, again, both constitutional requirements. There is a statutory requirement, and I want to spend a little time on this because it did come up in this redistricting a number of times, and that is how you actually establish the boundaries of the districts, the actual boundary lines. And there is a state statutory provision that lists what can be used as a boundary, and that's generally streets, rivers, streams, permanent features that you can go on particular maps and actually see those boundaries. Those are the only boundaries we are permitted to use. There were suggestions made through the redistricting process by citizens as why can't we draw a line here or draw a line here? And while those certainly made sense from a logical standpoint, they did not qualify as boundaries that we could use. And we'll talk about that in one particular instance in particular. Also, you have an equal population requirement, and equal I put in quotes because it doesn't have to be absolutely equal, but it has to stay within a deviation of 5% between the district that has the greatest population and the district that has the least population. So there has to be a less than 5% deviation between those 2 numbers. And then there are requirements that come out of federal law that derive out of the Voting Rights Act and some other federal principles having to do with redrawing magisterial lines in a way that affects racial population. And this has to do with packing, which is concentrating a voting block in one district to remove its ability to influence surrounding districts. And again, that is the accepted definition for that phenomenon. And then there is the corollary, which is called racial vote cracking, which is breaking up a voting block, a racial voting block in one district into many districts to dilute its previous influence. So that there's a certain numerical influence that that a racial bloc may have within a district. And we will talk about that particular phenomenon later. The census results came out on August 12th. This was roughly 6 months later than we are used to, but we still have the same constitutionally imposed deadline of this year. So we got figures much later, as all COVID related, and the census was late in getting numbers out. The numbers that we got, as all census numbers do every 10 years, they include total population, voting age population, and racial demographic data. So we got that data for the entire county, as did every other locality in Virginia. Chesterfield County population grew 15.5%, but since it did not grow equally among the districts, that's what required you to go into a process of equalizing population, and that was the task at hand. So this is basically the starting point after the 2020 census. So, and this was your starting point from a map standpoint, and again, redistricting is map drawing. Okay, it's always map drawing based on data. So this is where we began. And as a first step to this, we looked at various possibilities on how we could equalize population. And in contact with board members, we came up with what was, I'm going to call it now, the Redistricting Plan A, the initial plan, which the board actually then released to the public on September the 22nd. So it was actually before the public roughly 2 months ago. This particular plan did a lot of this. Again, this proposed plan did a lot of different things. One is it smoothed out some edges, made some of the districts more compact. It did that in Dale, it did that in Clover Hill, and actually that little piece in Skin Quarter in Midlothian smoothed that area out. And so what we looked at after that initial process and the initial proposal, we had these 4 changes. This is the Skin Quarter portion that went from Matoka to Midlothian. We had the Dale addition, which came from Midlothian. This was a portion of the Pocashock voting precinct. We had a Dale addition from Clover Hill, which was the Manchester voting precinct. And then finally, this addition, which was a portion of Wood Lake and the Cambria Cove area going from Matoka to Clover Hill. And the reason why, again, the things had to go in that direction was because Matoka had by far the highest population and had to lose property on the map. Bermuda was next. Dale was at the low point and had to add population. Clover Hill had to add population. Midlothian was kind of in balance there. So, but in making those various changes, it did equalize the population out to within the boundaries that I talked about, within the 5% deviation boundary. And once we confirmed that the populations worked, then we looked at what did this do to racial demographics? And again, this is from the original proposal that was presented. And it really did very little. There was very little change to any of the districts from a racial standpoint, from racial components. And so there's changes to Dale. I'm sorry, showing the original percentages of various demographic groups, and in orange and then in blue, and I'm colorblind, so I'm hoping I'm getting this right, and then blue being the how it would change if Plan A were adopted. And so that's the change to Matoka. Dale was just almost imperceptible change. Matoka, again, all very, very small changes, but Matoka added a little in the African-American population, dropped a little in the white population. There was in Clover Hill, there was a slight reduction in black population, slight increase in white population, and similarly in Midlothian. But again, we're talking about percentage points or tenths of a percentage point difference. So this, again, went out. The board adopted this as a proposal at the time, and made it very clear at that time that this was just a proposal. And thereby, we opened up an aggressive public input process. There was a dedicated redistricting portal that was set up on the county's website. I saw the number, and I think we now have received close to, if not at, about 350, 340 comments through that portal. So the portal has been used and actually used extensively. We had citizen comments that were received on the Board of Supervisors' own public meeting portal. So every time redistricting was discussed, people could comment on that portal as well. There were 2 live interactive community meetings that were held on Facebook Live that were well attended. We got lots of questions on those, answered them in real time, and you all participated. Some of you were able to participate in those live Facebook meetings, which I thought were very, very helpful, very instructive, and gave us a chance to answer a lot of questions. And I think we were able to handle every question that came up. And we got a good participation, actually, on both of those community meetings. Citizens were encouraged on our social media, on our website, at the community meetings, to propose alternative plans and to actually draw maps. It's one thing to comment on a plan that's proposed, but if there is a desire to look at something different, we were trying to encourage the public to offer something different in the way of a map. And so, in fact, Mr. Carroll at the second community meeting that was held on October 19th made a particular plea to the public to come up with maps if there was some other approach that we ought to be looking at. There was then the public hearing that was held before the board in person on October 27th. The portals themselves we left open until 12 noon today, so they have been available, and the board has had a chance to see those. The board has had a chance to read those. And we also had, I would say, a substantial amount of citizen contact of you. I know that you all have shared with me that you received comments by email, by phone, by text, by a variety of different sources. So you all received a lot of input in that regard. So one of the primary citizen feedback that we received came out of the Woodlake community. That was by far the highest percentage of comments that were received after the 22nd proposal was put out there for comment. And the Woodlake residents did not like the fact that the plan divided Woodlake between Clover Hill and Matoka. And residents, in response to the requests that we were making, actually drew maps and submitted maps on how we might come up with an alternative boundary that it would include more of the Woodlake community. And so the county, in conjunction with Woodlake, actually developed then an alternative approach, which I'm going to call proposed Plan B. And Plan B is really, in all other instances, the same, but what it does do is include more of the Woodlake community. And so it's the same Dale addition from Midlothian, it's the same Dale addition from Clover Hill, but this is the difference here, and that is that the portion coming into Clover Hill of the Woodlake community was expanded to include much more of the community. So, so that it became Plan B, and that was then put out on social media, was posted on the website, was actually part of this presentation, which was then made available to the public when the agenda went out. So this has been out there since, I think it was the 8th of November. This, if I maybe could stop, maybe just stop right here. What the Clover Hill, this new concept of Clover Hill addition from Atoka, including virtually all of Woodlake, what it does do, because of the boundary issues that we talked about before, it does include some portion of Foxcroft, because there was not any boundary that state law allows us to use where we could completely separate Foxcroft from Woodlake. And we did receive maps from Foxcroft showing a dotted line, can't we just do this and just separate us? But that dotted line did not follow one of the boundaries which state law allows us to use. I will say that given that reality, and given the state law as it currently is written, we don't have an opportunity to choose a dotted line that separates those two communities. However, this is a state statutory provision that the General Assembly adopted, and we are going to be looking at the possibility of, is there a way to expand the boundary options that state law currently gives us, and see if we can come up with something which might allow the kind of adjustment that that I know that we heard from a number of Foxcroft people that I think that they would prefer. So that is something that I think we can put on on a list of things to try to figure out, is there a way to approach maybe some other boundary options. So this then, as we do in redistricting, once we have figured out, does this new proposal meet the 5% requirement, which it did, then we took a look at what does it do to the racial demographics, and the fact is it does not really do much to change the demographics. There are some very modest changes. There's no change to Dale, because Dale's not affected. There's no change to Midlothian. There's no change to Bermuda, because those were not affected. So Matoka went up slightly in the black population as a result of Plan B, and Clover Hill correspondingly went down slightly on black population. But the other numbers stayed the same because there were no changes. So those are the two plans that were before you. Then this past Sunday, there was a plan that it was around noontime, there was a plan that was submitted, which I'm calling the beach proposal, because it does incorporate or involve, in large part, the beach voting precincts. This was a proposal, again, was received around noontime on Sunday, and it proposed adding, rather than adding any property to Dale from the north, from Midlothian or Clover Hill, adding property to Dale from the south, from Matoka. And the proposal And there was also a change to Clover Hill. To Clover Hill would pick up the South Manchester precinct. So that was the proposal. The problem with the Beach number 1 proposal was that it violated the equal population 5% rule. So it exceeded that deviation. And I actually think that Mr. Engel may have pointed that out to the group that proposed it. And then 8:30 that night, there was a proposal 2 that was submitted. And what this did was add the West Beach precinct as what I call a western appendage to the west of Beach. And its purpose was to increase the population in Dale and get within that 5%. And it did do that, but it creates, though, 2 problems which I am concerned with from the standpoint of redistricting. And that is, number 1, compactness. What we're talking about, and this is actually that proposal, and I'm going to give you one more slide. You can see the little bow tie right under Clover Hill. That's the South Manchester voting precinct. And right to the southwest of the little Dale black, where it says Dale, is the Beach Magisterial District, and to the west of that is the West Beach Magisterial District, voting precinct. What concerns me is, while that proposal does make Dale compact in part, it then extends this appendage out and basically takes away from the compactness. And I would say that it looks like a fairly obvious attempt to add population. So I'm concerned about the compactness, particularly since it is a constitutional provision that governs redistricting. But this was perhaps a greater concern of mine from a legal standpoint, and that is the result. Well, let me start here. Dale District has been a district that over time has been increasing in African American population. And if you go through the years, you can see that the trend in the increase. And right now, between the white population and the African American population in Dale, it's close to being on par. As we sit right now, it's roughly about 49% versus 46%, white versus black population. There is a principle in redistricting that has to do with racial cracking, and it is the notion of a 40% percentage of a racial component within a district. That is considered to be a viable presence, racial presence, to be an influential part of voting. Okay, and that's the way that it's expressed, but 40% is that number. And what concerns me here is that under this proposal, with Dale systematically over the years increasing in black population and starting to move into that 40% range, which has legal significance, this proposal would actually set that back. Okay, would in effect reverse that direction, and it would take the black population down to 35%, and move the white population basically well over 40 into 41%. That, to me, is a reversal of a trend, and I think is problematic. I can't tell you in any absolute terms, but it is, to me, a problematic change of direction in the racial composition of Dale. So between compactness and that, the newest beach proposal is of concern to me. I will say that neither the A nor the B proposal has those same concerns that are of concern to me. So, that's just my analysis of that, and that then leads us to. And I don't know that I want to go through the entirety of this, but you may have read there was an article in the RTD this morning. We were asked to answer questions. The county was asked to answer some questions. We answered them in a narrative format, and I think that we fairly hit the majority of the questions that were asked. But we did it in a narrative format, and that narrative is actually the next 4 slides. That was not printed by the RTD, and at least from contacting them today, we're not sure that they are going to print what we believe are the answers to the questions. I can, if the board is okay, I can go through this response. This is what we shared with the RTD, but it did not end up in the article. And that is, Chesterfield County has shared its redistricting process with county citizens in a public presentation on September 22nd before the Board of Supervisors, which was then posted on the county's website for citizens to view, 2 Facebook Live community meetings, both of which were well attended, and both of which were also posted on the county's website, an in-person public hearing before the board on October 27th, and other information posted on the website, social media, and in the county's weekly e-newsletter. Since September 22nd, citizens have been able to submit comments in a dedicated redistricting portal on the county's website, and to date, this when this was sent out, it was 250. It's now, I think, it's close to 350, or in that vicinity. So that's really 350 comments have been posted. We've described the method we used to create the initial redistricting proposal and emphasized it was driven by the requirement to equalize population while being mindful of the requirements that the district satisfy the rules of contiguity and compactness. We then looked to see whether there was any significant effect on racial demographics. We shared all of this data with the public and transferred the data to charts which demonstrate that there is a minimal effect on any racial categories resulting from that initial proposal, and this is Proposal A. Since September, we have asked for citizen input, making it clear that the initial proposal was just that, a proposal for comment. We also specifically asked for citizens to submit alternative maps, which we could then analyze in accordance with state and federal rules and guidelines. And in response to substantial feedback provided by the Wood Lake residents, accompanied by alternative maps, an alternate redistricting proposal was developed to keep Wood Lake in one magisterial district. Unfortunately, there's not a geographic feature, as state law currently requires there to be, that perfectly separates Foxcroft from Wood Lake. Like the initial proposal, this new Wood Lake proposal satisfies all legal requirements and has a minimal effect on racial demographics. Some of the comments we received invited us to draw district lines based on partisan political considerations and the voting histories of various segments of the county. These are not appropriate considerations for making local redistricting decisions. While the COVID-19 pandemic delayed the county from receiving census data until mid-August, about 6 months later than usual, which shortened the time frame for localities to share proposals, under state law, the board must approve a redistricting plan in 2021. That was what we sent, and that, I think, still is an accurate statement of where we are at this moment. The action that is being requested is that the board adopt a redistricting ordinance and accompanying maps. They both, Proposal A and Proposal B, which the board had available for the public, are both ordinances and maps are in your agenda item. The adopted ordinance and maps, once adopted by the board, then those maps, that ordinance, those maps, and then there's accompanying information that has to be sent to the Attorney General to comply with the new submission requirement to get certification from the Virginia Attorney General. There was, and just to point this out, there was an email that we received this afternoon, and somebody had gone back, appropriately, back to very early in the process when we were discussing that there are two methods that the board can utilize to get a state approval of our redistricting plan. And one has a lot of different deadlines and notice periods and all the rest. And that particular method says if there is a new map proposed, then there has to be some 15-day public comment period. And that person was inquiring, are we going to be doing that? And the answer is no. The board has selected the Attorney General certification process, which doesn't have that particular 15-day notice requirement in it. One thing that the board did choose to do, however, that even though we chose the Attorney General process, the board adopted a lot of the public comment process that's part of the other process. So all the public commentary that you received, you actually were not required to do any of that. You chose that you were going to get additional commentary from the citizens that way. And it did actually yield some other ideas, which the board then did accept and have and actually have embraced into one of the proposals. So anyway, we are right now at the point where we've held the public hearing, it's been closed, and the matter's before the board to decide the redistricting.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
You mentioned earlier deadline. What is the deadline for us to act as a board?
Well, to act as a board, we have to
a date? What's the
well, yeah,
date
the next meeting that you have is in December.
December.
You don't have another meeting scheduled. That, however, there still is a submission that has to be prepared for the Attorney General. That's going to take some time. This is a brand new process. No one has ever done this before. So we're used to doing submissions in the old days to the Justice Department through the Voting Rights Act, but that section of the Voting Rights Act was actually struck down by the Supreme Court of the United States. So this is a state corollary, but it's brand new. So I would say certainly my preference would be that a decision get made tonight. There's no reason why a decision can't be made tonight, but technically we have to have made a redistricting decision by the end of this calendar year.
Okay. All right. Thank you much, Jeff. Just before you vote, I just want to make a brief comment here, and that is that during the public hearing last month, citizens were told they may submit a redistricting plan for consideration. This week we received a map from citizens to consider the 14th. To be fair, we should review information from all citizens and have them an opportunity to review as well. Since this process will last the next 10 years, we should not rush. As a result, I suggest that we delay our redistricting vote until the December Board of Supervisors meeting. That's just my comment. Madam Clerk, once we'll entertain a motion and then go from there. We don't like to make a motion at this point. A motion now, second.
I'm going to make a motion to adopt plan, make sure I've got the right plan. B is the amended Wood Lake plan. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And do I need further language in that? Do I need to
No,
adopt the
that will
map and the
adopt-
ordinance?
No, that will adopt the ordinance and will adopt all the accompanying maps as set out in your agenda.
Thank you.
It's been moved. May I have a second?
Second.
Been moved and properly second. Any additional discussion? Hearing none. Madam Clerk, would you poll the
Yes,
board?
sir. Mr. Engel?
Aye.
Mr. Carroll?
Aye.
Ms. Haley?
Aye.
Mr. Winslow?
Aye.
Mr. Holland?
No.
Passes 4-1.